today's Top Boxing News.
Okay, and now it's time for our weekend recap. We're going to kick it off with Caleb Plant beating up and knocking out a game Trevor McCumby, who in spots didn't look half bad, at least at the start. Caleb Plant bounced back from a knockdown to put a steady beating on Trevor McCumby, eventually stopping him at the very end of the 9th round of a hugely entertaining and skillful super middleweight contest on the Canelo Alvarez versus Edgar Berlanga undercard. Plant had made it clear during fight week that he didn't much care for McCumby, and he cared even less for McCumby's family, who yelled repeatedly at the Tennessee-born, Vegas-based fighter that he was a bum. McCumby, he pointed out, had never faced anyone on Plant's level before.
He didn't look half bad.
Although Plant backed that up with an impressive victory, McCumby did more than enough in defeat to suggest that the super middleweight division has a new contender of note, and certainly one who knows how to entertain. We had a lot of fun, McCumby said in defeat. It was a great show. I wanted to show him that I was athletic too, and strong. Watching the fighters side by side in the ring with each other, Trevor McCumby was noticeably bigger.
He was a bigger guy than Caleb.
Strong, too. In the early goings of the match, you can see this guy can punch. He's got some power. After something of a feel-out round in the first round, McCumby landed a big right hand in the second that knocked Caleb Plant off balance. Although he promptly shook his head in defiance, McCumby kept pressing, landing a right hand that knocked Plant back and a left hand in the corner that snapped back his head before McCumby wrestled him to the ground. At this stage, McCumby was physically bullying Plant as he landed a left and a right and threw Plant to the canvas again. Plant, however, remained composed and compact, staying focused on the task at hand. In the fourth, a McCumby hook landed with enough force on Plant's shoulder to knock him down, and Plant seemed to be in trouble. That would, however, be McCumby's high watermark, as the turning point of the contest came in the next frame.
That seemed to have done more to wake Caleb Plant up and seize control of the match after the knockdown.
After being staggered by an explosive right-left from McCumby, Plant turned him around and pushed him against the ropes, smothering his opponent's punches and working him inside with short, snappy blows to the body and the head, highlighted by an uppercut that couldn't miss. He caught me pulling out and hit me in the shoulder. That's part of the game, Plant said after the fight. He came in with wild punches, and I just had to stay focused. That's what champions do. That's experience.
That's what won Caleb the fight. Poise, the poise that experience gets you, not panicking.
Rounds 6 and 7 were much of the same. McCumby launching power shots at Plant in the center of the ring, but Plant remaining composed, working McCumby to the ropes and tearing into him for prolonged periods with short hooks and uppercuts.
So when a guy like McCumby, an unbeaten up-and-comer who's got some tools, he's got something.
He's the one who's used to doing all the pushing, unaccustomed to being pushed back, is faced with a Caleb Plant, a former champion who's competed at this level where Trevor has not.
It's not how you start, it's how you finish.
Trevor got off to a decent start, but faded down the stretch as Caleb Plant seized control of the match by staying composed. The pace slowed a little bit in the 8th as Plant caught his breath, but in the 9th, he was back on top, once more pinning McCumby to the ropes. An uppercut was followed by a flurry upstairs, and then, after pausing to reset, Plant sent a right hand into McCumby's jaw that landed with punishing effect. McCumby was hurt now, and seeing his opening, Plant unleashed with both hands. A left hand exploded on McCumby's jaw, and McCumby sagged on the ropes. Referee Alan Huggins stepped in to halt the contest just as the bell rang to end the round. Official time was 2 minutes and 59 seconds into round 9. I knew I had him hurt, and I had to go to work, Plant said. It was time to get my belt. Now I'm ready to go home and play with my daughter.
My thoughts.
It was a fun little fight while it lasted. Trevor did better than most of us expected him to, and it's for that reason that I wouldn't mind seeing him again against, say, a Diego Pacheco, or maybe a Bektamir Melenkuziev, maybe a Christian Mabili. These unbeaten up-and-comers that have not yet become champions at this weight, I feel like Trevor would be a good acid test for them, because if he was good enough to knock down Caleb Plant, a former champion, maybe he can push them a little bit too. Trevor didn't do bad.
He didn't look half bad. He didn't look out of place with Caleb.
There is such a thing as losing well and losing with dignity. I think that Trevor did that yesterday, and I wouldn't mind seeing more of this fighter. As far as Caleb, who got himself back in the winner's bracket with this fight. Remember, before this, he was still coming off that loss to David Benavidez.
The David Benavidez fight that took place in March of last year. Before yesterday, it had been over a year's time since Caleb had a fight. Is it going to be over a year's time before his next fight?
How much time will Caleb Plant allow to pass before his next contest? Is he willing to cross over to some other side of the street for an opportunity? Because the biggest and best fights for Caleb right now,
They involve other fighters that are on other sides of the street, like Jaime Munguia, who's currently on the top-ranked side of things, or Diego Pacheco, who's over there at Matchroom.
Edgar Berlanga too, he's over there. These are all good fights for Caleb moving forward, that if he wants to make money, he has to change his decorum.
There's Jaime Munguia and Christian Mabili over there at Top Rank. There's Diego Pacheco and Edgar Berlanga, who are with Matchroom.
There's Bektamir Melakuziev, who's over there on the Golden Boy promotion side of things. There are lots of fights. There are lots of fights that you can make for Caleb Plant moving forward. Caleb, who has no intention of moving up to light heavyweight. Earlier this week, I read he plans on staying in the super middleweight division for the duration of his career, and thus...
There's plenty of fights. You just gotta be willing to change your decorum. It was a fun fight while it lasted, though I don't think anybody's surprised to see that Caleb took care of business.
I think that's what we all were expecting, and I think that now that Caleb, the former champion, is back in the winner's bracket, there are a lot of interesting situations out there for this guy. We then move over to the co-main event, the fight between reigning champion, WBA middleweight champion Erislandy Lara and former 2-division champion Danny Garcia. You guys will know that I approached this fight with a lot of skepticism, because everything as it pertains to boxing suggested to me Lara should win. Danny doesn't do anything that Lara needs to worry about. He's a guy with slow feet,
Works off the counter.
where Erislandy Lara is a notoriously difficult fighter to counter because he's so economic and so responsible with his output. Just staying behind his jab and peppering Danny with the jab, managing the distance. Lara, the slightly taller, longer fighter of the two, made it very difficult for Danny to get anything off.
Often second best in a lot of situations because Danny at his best works off the counter.
But if the guy's keeping distance between you and him, staying behind his lead hand, moving while he does it, getting off a counter,
It's not gonna happen.
and it didn't happen for Danny. The rounds were monotonous. Each round, similar to the last one, where Lara's just peppering this guy with his lead hand, peppering him with jabs.
Danny can't do nothing about it.
Boxing insider Rick Glacier reacted to the fight by saying that Danny Garcia is totally shot. In slow motion, he couldn't get off his punches. Knocked down, Angel Garcia pulled the plug and the fight was over. And so is Danny Garcia's career. That's it for Danny.
There's no other way to put it. There's no nice way to put it.
A big part of the reason I approached this fight with so much skepticism is because everything as it pertains to boxing suggests that Lara should win. The style of the fighters, their experience level, detail of the tape, as well as activity that Danny hadn't fought in something like 2 years going into this thing. So the idea that he's gonna now shake off ring rust against a somewhat bigger fighter that has a style that doesn't favor his...
Based on boxing, there's no way Danny beats Lara. Based on boxing.
Then what was the skepticism about, you ask?
Match fixing. I was worried about match fixing. That they've spent over a year's time trying to get Danny Garcia this opportunity, and it's almost like they want to gift him a belt. They want to put a belt in his hands.
I was worried that the outcome of this fight had already been decided behind closed doors, and what this was really all about was getting Danny a belt so that he can then defend it against Errol Spence Jr. That's what I was worried about. Match fixing.
Would Lara get a fair shake on the cards? If it does go to the cards, is this even a real fight, or has the outcome already been decided? That's what I was worried about, because if this is a fight, a legitimate boxing match, then Lara should win.
Rick Glacier continued, Danny Garcia thanking Al Heyman while simultaneously complaining about the inactivity. You can't make it up.
He's right.
So perhaps Danny would have been better equipped for this contest if he had actually fought in the last 2 years, that if Al Heyman would have done more to get this guy a fight, keep him busy, keep him active, he would have stood a better chance or performed better.
Maybe.
The way I see it, if Danny wanted to fight in the last 2 years in the build-up of this fight, he could have.
Maybe not on the PBC side of things. If opportunities were scarce on the PBC side of things, then just go somewhere else. A lot of other fighters did.
Jahan Ingram, Jaleel Hackett, Subriel Matias, they all went somewhere else.
Deontay Wilder, Andy Ruiz.
Michelle Rivera at 140, Elvis Rodriguez at 140, they all went somewhere else. That when opportunities became scarce, they jumped ship. So if Danny hasn't fought in the last 2 years...
Some of that is Al Heyman's fault, some of it, but most of it is actually Danny's fault. If you wanted to fight, you would have fought.
What he thought was he's gonna wrangle an opportunity, a world title opportunity he really doesn't deserve at a weight that he's never fought, on the premise that Lara's in his 40s, that the guy's old enough that maybe you can beat him and win an easy title.
He was wrong.
Stylistically to me, it seemed like a fight that should be an easy night's work for Arislandi Lara, using his jab, managing distance, and moving around. These are all the things he's good at, whereas Danny has notoriously slow feet, is often second best in the exchange, and while he is younger than Lara by a few years, Lara's been fighting. Danny hasn't, so by all accounts on paper, Lara should win. It all seemed to point in the direction of Lara.
In the fight, it was all one-way traffic from Lara.
Now that the dust has settled and the smoke is cleared, Lara remains middleweight champion. That if this is a legitimate boxing match and not a scripted event, then Lara should win in one-sided fashion, which he did. He remains WBA middleweight champion, but what now?
He's 41.
The PBC have at least one other champion at this weight on this side of the street, Carlos Adames. Should we expect to see a unification match between Lara and Adames, or will he cross the street? Will he go over to Top Rank for the winner of Yanni Bekelam Kanalai versus Mikhailiovic? What is Lara gonna do now?
What should Danny do?
Retire? After a piss-poor display like that?
Pack it up.
Let's make one thing clear. It's not that Danny got ragdolled. It's not like he got brutalized in the fight. The aesthetic of the match was a dull one.
He doesn't have it anymore.
That's the main thing. That at this point in Danny's career, he doesn't beat anybody solid. He doesn't beat anyone of substance. Mentally, he checked out.
He's done.
He quit yesterday, folks. After getting dropped by a decent-looking left hand in the ninth, getting up and going back to his corner, he quit.
He gave up.
There's nothing more for him to do. 154 is too deep a division with too many young, ambitious, and dangerous fighters for Danny. He doesn't beat none of them, and he can't beat a 41-year-old Lara at 160.
Thus, it's time to pack it up. It's time to walk away.
We then come to the main event of that same card, the Canelo Alvarez versus Edgar Berlanga unified super middleweight title fight. A fight that was as lopsided as we all expected it to be, but in the absence of a knockout, where most of us were expecting that Canelo should dispatch Edgar. He didn't.
He should knock him out.
And he didn't, though there's no question that he won the fight clear, and won the fight by a wide margin. Watching it, I just got the sense that maybe Canelo's a bit lackadaisical. He's winning the fight, and he's clearly winning the fight.
Fighting at a pace that is comfortable for him. As Edgar Berlanga circles away the way I expected him to circle away, I told you he was going to run.
That all this talk about using his jab and his ring savvy, his ring IQ, that's just a fancy way of saying you're going to move. You're going to run. That even though you're the taller, longer fighter, the bigger, younger fighter, you're not going to engage and you're not going to take it to Canelo. You're going to run.
He ran.
It's running because you were on the perimeter of the ring. Back to the ropes the entirety of the fight, and you're not getting there on your own. Canelo is putting you there. As he marches forward and you deliberately give up ground, you're not pivoting off your jab to hold the center and keep the fight in the center of the ring. Round after round, you're letting Canelo put you on the ropes.
Where's the part where you put him on the ropes? Where's the part where you step into your punches and put his back on the ropes? When does that happen?
It doesn't, because the guy is running. For fear of engaging Canelo Alvarez mid-range to inside, where he can get off those compact hooks, you're giving up ground.
Like Jermel Charlo did, I want to say that Edgar Berlanga did let his hands go a little more than Jermel Charlo did, but the aesthetic of that fight was very similar to this one.
So are you fighting to win? Or are you just trying not to get knocked out, not to get put down, the way you did in the early goings of this fight, off a photo finish left hook, expertly delivered?
Canelo fought at a comfortable pace for him, perhaps too comfortable, because watching him, I didn't get a sense of urgency from his performance. You could see he's winning the fight. He's clearly winning the fight.
The speed is still there. The strength, the impactful punches, all of it, the defense, it's still there. And yet I still got the sense that Canelo could be doing more to finish the fight, that he's playing with his food. He's not doing more because he doesn't have to.
He's on cruise control.
Fought the fight on cruise control. That's how the last 3 or 4 Canelo Alvarez performances have been. You see, he still has all of his finer qualities, but it's almost like he's not hitting the gas.
Where he could.
Perhaps the byproduct of over 60 professional bouts, having been a professional boxer since age 15 and making the vast sums of cash that he's made over the years, he just doesn't fight with a sense of urgency anymore. In tandem with opponents that sometimes aren't really even trying so much as surviving, don't want to take chances.
Is Canelo slipping? Is he on the back nine?
He could be. Over 60 professional fights in his mid-30s, slippage is a distinct possibility. But even a Canelo Alvarez that has lost a step is still better than most of what's out there. And most of what's out there, you're talking about guys who are bigger and younger than Canelo.
There's no question that Canelo beat Jaime Munguia, who's bigger and younger. There's no question that he beat Edgar Berlanga, who is also bigger and younger. That if Canelo Alvarez is starting to slip, he's still better than most of these guys, so you've got to give him credit for that.
I do. A little bit of credit for Edgar as well, being able to survive this loss to Canelo Alvarez does not hurt his stock. There are still so many fights out there for Edgar that he can have moving forward. A showdown with Jaime Munguia or Diego Pacheco, who's right there with him on Matchroom. He can fight him.
He can fight Jaime Munguia, Christian Mabili,
Caleb Plant. He's got a score to settle with Caleb Plant. You can do that fight, and that's a decent-sized fight. You can sell it.
Edgar's stock didn't take a hit yesterday, at least no more of a hit than Jaime's stock took.
John Ryder's stock took when they fought Canelo. Edgar still has prospects.
And Canelo?
Question now is, what is Canelo going to do moving forward? Who is he going to fight? Is he really serious about fighting Dimitri Bivol again if he beats Artur? Is he serious about that? What about David Benavidez? What about Terence Crawford?
Conor McGregor. He mentioned a crossover boxing versus mixed martial arts fight with Conor McGregor.
What is Canelo going to do? The fight that I would like to see him have, most of all, is the David Benavidez fight. That's still the fight that I want to see him in.
You still think he beats him?
I do, because David's not going to move lateral and stay on the perimeter of the ring. David's going to come forward, throwing punches and bunches, which will allow Canelo to catch him in between. As strange as this might sound to all of you, I still think Canelo wins that fight.
You're likelier to do damage against an opponent that's coming forward than one that is moving away from you to take something off your punch.
The trajectory of your punch versus your opponent's forward momentum amplifies the damage. It does more to amplify it.
So I still think he beats him, but he's got to fight him.
It's not enough for me or you to say it, or for me or you to believe it. He's got to have the fight and win the fight to get the credit. And that's one of the few fights he has left that I want to see him in. He's got to fight David.
There are not that many big fights left for Canelo.
It's one of the few big ones that he has left. And I feel on the heels of this lopsided decision win over Edgar, that's what he needs to do.
He needs to fight David.